This episode of Filmnut is brought to you by Kaimu Flowers, fresh orchids and tropicals from the lush, rich, volcanic coast of Hawaii. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Filmnut. I'm your host, Jeff Schubert. Glad you can join us for tonight's show. You can check out more episodes of Filmnut on demand at thestream.tv/Filmnut. If you've got Twitter, you can follow us on @thefilmnut, and you can also like us on Facebook. Well, in baseball, they say chicks dig the long ball. In movies, everybody digs the cool car. From the 1956 DeSoto Fire Dome Seville in the movie American Graffiti to the Batmobile and the Duke Boys General Lee. But you know what? It isn't always about the coolness. Check out Al Bundy's broken down Dodge, or Frank Costanza's blue Ford Granada, or Scooby-Doo's Mystery Machine. If it's true that a car is an extension of a person, then it's also true that it is an extension of a character in a movie, or as my guest might say, a character in his own right. In fact, my guest tonight is Fireball Tim. I like saying that. He is the concept designer who has worked on over 350 projects, including designing cars for Batman, Thor, the Flintstones, Gone in 60 Seconds, the X-Men, G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra, and for upcoming films, Captain America and Mission Impossible 4. Here is a man who truly loves what he does, and I love that. Fireball Tim.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
I love watching people do what they love doing, and they're good at it. And in going over your website at hollywoodgarage.com, listening to your podcast, watching some of your YouTube videos, it's clear you have a real passion for cars and designing them, and look forward to talking to you right now about it.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, when I grew up, it was two things that I loved, and I realized, you know, how much I loved cars. And I grew up in a Hollywood family, so my parents, who were writer-producers, were always coming up with new stuff, and I was always trying to figure out a way to fit a car into what they were writing. Most of the time it didn't fit, but you know, they gave me two things. It was art supplies, and it was die-cast cars. And things really haven't changed. I still love art supplies, and I still collect die-cast cars, and I still have cars that are a bit bigger that you can actually fit in now.
Well, cars have changed a lot over the years, but the first question I want to throw at you, and maybe we'll get into more of then and now, if you will, from when you started to now, but what is your initial process? For example, you get contacted, you get a script, do you break it down, or how do you go about doing what you do when you get called for a job?
It can actually, it has happened in a number of different ways. Everything from a script showing up to they need something conceptually, all the way to they have finished designs that they need to translate it into a build. So every project is completely unique, different to itself.
Well, let's pick, let's say Thor, for instance. Does the studio contact you and say, hey, we need a car for a Norse god who's arrogant but a little depressed because he's been cast out of Asgard? You know what I'm saying? How does that?
Yeah, well, for Thor, you know, we also, sometimes the builds are not as glamorous as the Batmobile or things like that. Sometimes they're just military vehicles. Sometimes they'll pick something off the lot and then they'll want it painted a different color, or they'll want it souped up, or you know, different applications. For Thor, it was simply that there was some military Jeeps that were built and had to be repainted, but there was a particular look that they wanted. It wasn't so much a design process as, and generally you can't conceptualize for too long, because a lot of times it's like you got 2 weeks and you got to, you know, like in Priest, there were a couple of bikes that we built that were done in the film, and we had about a week to build those 2 bikes, and that was it. So things have to move very fast. There's not a lot of time to conceptualize in some cases.
Is there a difference between, let's say, a military car? Because I would imagine a military car, there's maybe not as much room for creativity because it's the military and you want to be authentic and you want to be what it really looks like. But in a fantasy or sci-fi, the military can be different.
That can be the case, but as an example, in G.I. Joe, it's a modern-based tale. So, but everything has a futuristic aspect to it, has a futuristic look to it. So there's certain applications that the vehicles have to achieve, and then there's a bit of fancy that you can go in and start adding guns that look like they do things, but they don't actually do things. And that's the fun part, is to come up with a look that sells the car as a character, that, you know, people are going to look at this and say, wow, you know, I wouldn't want to meet that in a dark corner, but that particular unit on it doesn't actually function. A lot of it is just kind of gobbledygook that's added to it to make it look really cool.
Okay, now when you say conceptualize, break that down for me, please. Is it drawing? Is it using computer software? Is it then going back and forth with the director or production designer? How does that flow work?
Initially, it's just sketching out the ideas, and you don't need a computer for that. You know, I've sketched on a napkin, I've sketched on somebody's palm, I've sketched on my own palm. You know, whatever's in front of you, you sketch on. You know, if you're having a meeting at a DuPars, which you would, or you have a meeting at the shop or anywhere else. The point is to get the ideas down on paper, to break down the script, however that works, and then to start to develop those ideas into more finished sketches so you get a clear picture of what that could be. Son of the Mask was a real good example of that, although it wasn't a great movie. The car was very cool.
Now, I think we have a picture of the Son of the Mask. We'll pull that up for when that's ready. That'll come up for us in a moment, and then we can have you explain it, but go on.
Well, it's initial sketches that were just black and white.
I think we have it right there.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the early finished renderings based on a 1969 Roadrunner, which we ended up not using that. Originally, we were going to use a classic muscle car. We ended up using what was in Australia. The movie was so long ago.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. It's a Pontiac here, and the way you can tell is that just in the roof line, you can see basically the only thing that's left in that vehicle is the shape of the window. So that wasn't touched. So things have to change sometimes. That a lot of times you'll have a certain car that you want to build, and an example for that, we want originally to use the Roadrunner. Then that application didn't make sense. They wanted to be able to use a new car that was reliable and didn't have any issues. So we ended up going with that. It was a Holden Monaro is what it was. And then so you take that treatment that you did on the original and then you apply it to the new car. Originally the sketch had an 8-foot tall rear wheel because they wanted it looking like a cartoon. So I'd sketch those up, did the finished renderings, and the way I work is I'll do as much hand-drawn rendering as I can, and then I'll scan that and I'll finish that up on the computer. So it takes on a slick, more digitized look, but not so slick as, you know, a lot of the guys nowadays, they just work solely on the computer and everything looks photoreal, and I like that artistic expression of it, so that you see that although it has a slickness to it, it's still rendered, it still feels gritty and a bit more real to me, and in the sense that as an artistic piece. So I enjoy that process.
And so then at what juncture then are you showing your work to someone at the studio for approval before you take the next step?
All the way from the initial sketch. You know, if you work with the director and you know, you'll sit down with some of the black and white sketches, and he'll say, well, I like this component, and I like this component, so let's do another version that's that, and let's add color to that one now. So we'll go from initial sketches to some color renditions, color versions. It might go as far as a 3D model if there's time. If there isn't, I'll take those sketches, give it to the shop, and the guys just start booking.
Now, I wasn't kidding in my introduction. I have heard you refer to a car as a character in a film. Can you elaborate on your thought process of that?
Absolutely. I mean, the cars are essential characters in the film. I think people would definitely take Knight Rider as an example. Can you remember who the actor was in the latest Knight Rider TV show?
Right.
Most people don't remember who the actor is, but everybody remembers the fact that the car was cool. Right. You know, and you know, a lot of people weren't happy that it was a Mustang as opposed to a Camaro. You know, as the Firebird that was originally used.
Trans Am, correct?
Yeah, exactly. But people remember that because I think the people have an emotional attachment to their vehicles. You remember growing up, you remember what your first car was, you remember where you were when you got your first kiss in that first car, you remember what movie you saw. You know, there's so much emotion that's wrapped up in your vehicle experience, and that's where the Hollywood Garage came from, is merging the best of automotive enthusiasm, the people that love cars and the people that love action movies, and you merge that together. And that solidifies. If people remember the Cobra from the Cobra Mercury from the movie Cobra, they'll remember that. Yeah, the movie wasn't too good, but oh man, that car! I mean, I grew up with that car, and then all these stories start coming out. You know, and
well, you know, there are certain movies. Obviously, you know, things like Batman or Scooby-Doo. There are certain movies where it's obvious the car has a natural imprint, or horror movies like Christine, or something to that effect. But as I really started to dig into preparing for this episode, it's also the extension of the everyday characters, the Al Bundys, the Frank Costanzas, and so forth. Do you get involved with designing, you know, conceptualizing cars for just regular, ordinary movies, or are they all science fiction?
It's everything. It's a little bit of everything. You don't have to go through a very elaborate design process if it's something that they pick some car off the lot and then they they want it red, or they want a different bumper, or things like that. Working on a Steven Spielberg project now, and the cars are very straightforward. But to me, you know, when you create something that's purely conceptual, whether it's science fiction or it's action-based, or something for G.I. Joe, or something for Priest, those are real great expressions, because they become a combination of a lot of people's thoughts. You know, I mean, I am a movie car designer, but I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with. And we have tremendous builders. The shop is called Cinema Vehicle Services. And there's fabricators and painters and guys that do stuff that are extraordinary, far better than I could ever do. And
so at Cinema Vehicle Services, you have hundreds of cop cars, cabs.
Absolutely.
All different kinds of. You have taxi cabs that are cut in half. Why would you have a taxi cab that's cut in half?
Well, you know, you can't always get the entire crew and the camera into the taxi to get the shot. So sometimes you just cut the taxi in half, and you mount it onto the back of the truck, you know, that has the camera, so that way you can shoot the actors. At the same time, there's the reverse, so the front half will, you know, will use both sides. You know, you'll use the front, and when you see a taxi cab driver driving, and then he turns around and talks to the guy behind him, generally he's talking to the camera, and there is no back of half of the taxi. You know, it's pretty cool. So those are called bucks, and they're used for a variety of ways. And sometimes they're created as simulator rides, so they'll bounce up and down. And the last thing you want is an actor worrying about driving while he's trying to act at the same time. So that's all, you know, part of movie magic. Excellent.
Well, let's check into with the chat room and see if we've got any questions for you on the board. Let's see. Ow, my head. Take some aspirin. Would like to ask, where did you get your start, and what was the first car you designed for a movie?
The first car was the Batmobile for the movie Batman.
Not a bad first job, right?
Not a bad first job. That was just some initial concepts. I really didn't have much faith in it. I think it was like, wow, what is this about? And you know, I didn't even know that people did that kind of thing. I wasn't at Art Center. I wanted to be a car designer. I didn't know the parameters that you could do. I ended up working for Disney afterward for a few years. But that was the first car. I can't necessarily say that was my first break, because I didn't know that was anything more than a couple of sketches and a few ideas. But when the movie came out, and I think it was '89, I went and saw it, and I was like, wow. I mean, look what happens. Look how fast you can turn around these things. You know, when you're a designer, a car designer for the automotive industry, you know, it's 7 to 10 years before a concept, you know, comes out and it's driving on the street. It's like, oh, I worked on that when I was a little kid, you know. And but the turnaround time is so fast in film. It's really exciting, and I love that energy. There's nothing better than being on set and watching something that you conceptualize that went from a sheet of paper that you drew out an idea, and the director said, yeah, that's cool, that's the one I want to go with. And it goes to the shop, and the guys build it. It goes on set, and they shoot it. And then a few months later, maybe sometimes a year later, you go out into the theater and you watch it. You know, and you can affect millions of people in a very positive way. And that's tremendous power. And I think with that power comes tremendous responsibility to do your absolute best.
We're talking about Batman, but a little Spider-Man kind of power and responsibility line there.
Yeah, true.
Now, do you have a signature addition to that Batmobile that, that was from my sketch? Or
no, I think that, you know, I enjoy the initial concept phase, is getting that initial idea out. And I think that they kept that. I think they kept the emotional attachment, that feeling, because when I did those initial sketches, it was like, you know, I didn't want to go off of anything that I had seen before. And there'd been a lot, you know, there was George Barris's Batmobile from the Adam West TV show.
Who you knew as a child, ironically.
Oh yeah, I know George very well. He's a great guy, and he's been around forever. I think he's 130 now. But he's, you know, and he's done a tremendous amount of stuff. He's an icon, but there's a big gap between where George's day and my day now. You know, I went to school with Chip Foose, and not really wasn't anybody in that realm. You know, there was Big Daddy Roth, but I think that when I did those initial sketches, I wanted to do something that was purely emotional as to if I wanted to do a Batman movie, you know, what kind of idea would I want to generate? You know, and I wanted to do it on black canson paper, so you really didn't see it that well. So there was an emotional attachment that people could look at, like, oh, you know. And I did a lot of keyframe art for a lot of different films, and keyframe art is essentially a frame from the movie to sell them on the idea why they should give, you know, they should give the director $200 million to do this film. And if they can look at that piece and say, oh, wow, well, that, you know, if we can do that, we can do 10% of that, then that's going to be cool. So that's the way I wanted to do the initial sketches, and I think that worked well for them.
Sounds good. Starliner would like to ask, I am a fan of Steve Stanford and Tom Taylor's style. Do you also do more traditional / mild custom sketching, and who have been your influences?
I do quite a bit of sketching for custom stuff. We do our own vehicles for SEMA. I'm doing one right now, which is what we call Project King Tahoe. Stanford there's a lot of great designers out there, great illustrators, and all those guys inspire me because, you know, it's not a competitive world; it's a creative world, and you have to give not only into what you love, but you have to put those guys on your shoulders. You have to. When I look at Chip stuff or anybody else, and I think it's cool, you know, I'll post that to my blog because I want people to see that and be inspired by those guys. I think some of the influences I had growing up were Sid Mead, was Luigi Colani, was an Italian designer. There's just there are tremendous guys out there that are so good. They inspire me daily, but not necessarily even car designers. There's Frank Stevenson, who's a car designer, a friend of mine. He's really good as far as traditional vehicles, supercars that are on the road. But, you know, I get inspired by all kinds of things. You know, it's all in the moment. It may be everything from a turtle shell to a flower to the shape of a flame that I get, you know, passing by something. I don't know.
Right.
You know, it can come from anywhere at any time. It's not something that you plan. So, but yeah, I'm inspired by those guys, and I love seeing people push that envelopes which raises me to a higher level.
Absolutely, it's great. You know, whether you're a musician, an actor, an artist, writer, true artists get inspired by other artists' great work.
Absolutely.
I think that's one constant that you see throughout.
Yeah, I need them. Yeah. I need them. And you want to say, oh, you know, when I was in school, it was frustrating because you would look at somebody's rendering and you go like, how did you do that? How did you achieve that? And then when they finally sat you down and did it with you, you had that aha moment like, oh man, now I can do that too. And not only can I do that, but I can take that to the next level. And that's the whole game in designing for Hollywood, is that the audience is very sophisticated, and you can't do the same old thing. You know, Transformers is coming out, and in fact, it's out already. And I'm going to go see it tomorrow. And I'm hoping to see some things that I haven't seen before, because that's really what people expect. You don't want to go back and see the same old stuff.
Well, it's interesting. Speaking of the sophistication of the audience, I want to also throw in the advancement of digital cameras. We had an Iron Man 2 camera operator come on Filmnut right before the release of the movie, and he was talking about these digital cameras that they attach to the cars and so forth. Mm-hmm. So again, between the sophistication of the audience and the camera technology where you can see and do so much more, does that provide a greater challenge for you, and how has your workflow changed as a result?
I think that the workflow has changed for us in the fact that there's no limitation anymore. For a long time, there was limitation. Things like the studios coming in and they take a vehicle and they go out and they shoot it, and they suddenly realize, oh man, we got the car going left to right and we really need it right to left. Now they can flop the stuff, they can flop the guy that's inside driving and put him on the inside. They can reverse the typeface on the side of the car. There's all these things that they can do that they couldn't do before. Now if for some reason they're filming and they happen to see that there's a door removed that has a camera rig attached to it, they can go ahead and they can do that, because in post they can put a door back on the car later and they don't have to worry about that. So it changes kind of the scope of what we do, but I think that it's almost like, instead of being limited that we're working with a pencil, now we have a pen, now we have markers, now we have paintbrush, now we have all these different tools that you can work with. It's really exciting. And now cars can do anything that you can dream up. They can jump from building to building. They can go up sides of buildings. They can do things that you just couldn't ever conceive of doing before. My brother and my dad are writers, and And now it's just, they'll call me up and say, hey, I need this really cool chase scene, and we can pretty much do whatever we want because CG is not as expensive as it used to be. How do we solve getting from this point to this point? So we'll come up with a really cool idea that has the car spin in a certain way or rolls in a corkscrew. Or there's just infinite ways that you can solve issues.
It's a lot more fun. It's opened up a lot more.
It's a total playground. It's
a total playground.
It's really a blast.
And does it require you to pay more attention to fine detail because the audience is seeing things that they wouldn't have seen before?
Absolutely, and you learn to see things that you didn't see before. You learn to notice textures of trees, of things. When a car goes past, directors are looking at not only textures but colors, light, shade, contrast, hues, all these different things that you wouldn't consider. When I was young, I used to sit next to Sid Mead, who was a designer, did designs for Blade Runner and a lot of things, and he showed me this painting he did of the Grand Canyon. It was about this long, and it was broken up into 5 sections, like you were looking through 5 different color panes of glass into the Grand Canyon. And I thought, that is extraordinary. If I was looking through rose-tinted glasses to the Grand Canyon, or blue tint, or green, or something, it was a mind-blowing experience because it made me understand color in a way that I never envisioned. And I realized going to school, they still didn't even know that kind of stuff. So I feel really blessed that I've been trained in a lot of different ways, and my parents really egged me on with everything I did, whether it was right or wrong. They said, try that, see if it works. If it doesn't, move on to the next thing. So you just keep plugging forward, and you learn to blaze your own trail.
Sounds like it's a good wealth of experience. Let's see, back to the chat room. Boo Bird, hope you're liking the show. If 10 years from now we're all driving hybrids or electric cars, how will that change what you do? So reality imitates, art imitates life, and so forth. How would that type of change affect?
Well, it's already changing what we do. We want to incorporate more green technology in everything that we do. I currently work with a company called Lifetime Oil Filter. It's an oil filter you never have to change. It eliminates putting oil filters into landfills. It eliminates the usage of oil. It does a lot of really fantastic things. And we try to use that on every vehicle. Every project vehicle we do for SEMA, any custom builds we do, we recommend as much green technology as we can. The thing is that not everybody's in a position to buy a brand new Prius or an Insight or something that's green. So you have to find ways to make existing vehicles greener, And we're heavily into that. That's something I'm very passionate about. I live in a town that's very eco-friendly and very conscious. And I drive a Tahoe, so I have to be very, I have to think clearly about what it is that we want to achieve with things like that. So.
Has Hollywood started requesting more hybrid vehicles for movies, or not so much?
Not so much, but I think that it's, you have to do your part. I don't.
No, it's great. Absolutely.
I wouldn't sit back and wait for them to decide. But I think that if there's an option, and it makes obviously, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do a hybrid Batmobile just yet.
Right.
But there may be a case to say that new technology. But I think you would be more like high dramatic, blah 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 drive.
Right.
For the movies. But and those cars aren't driven that much, so they're not necessarily. Ruin the environment as far as using them on such a limited space, but
right, there's certainly a scientific jargon way, blah 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 way to work that in.
Yeah, and it's about the story, But I think that if there's an opportunity to use a green vehicle, we're not going to sit and wait for someone to ask for it. I think that we're going to provide that as one of the smart solutions.
Let's see if I can pronounce this. Chum Lodio, hopefully I got that right, Chum. Thanks for putting your question in. Was the Batmobile built on an existing vehicle or from the ground up? Was it really drivable, or were the driving sequences effects?
The answer, it was built on 2 Imperial chassis that were put together. The car was about 20 feet long. It was pretty good size. It was drivable, but several of them were built. So some were shells, some were hero cars that were for close-ups and things like that. A lot of them have been built since then. Individuals have built much nicer versions, that drive really well. Right. But it's not something you plan on making a U-turn in. It's just not something that makes a lot of sense to drive on LA freeways or anything like that. But yeah, they have to be functional. They have to be. You go through the script and you say, okay, this stunt has to be achieved. Is that something that we can do in this one vehicle, or do you have to build 2? And the biggest challenge for Son of the Mask was they had the budget to build 1 car, and that's something you never want to hear. But that's all they had because They had all these stunts, and they had all the stuff that they had to achieve. And you screw up the car with something as simple as what Bumblebee went into and crashed into another truck. They had the budget to build, 30 Bumblebees, no big deal. But when you have a movie that doesn't have the luxury of a budget like that, and you're biting your nails, hoping that the stunt guys know what they're doing and nothing happens to the car.
Now, unlike Batman, where you just did a few sketches, now between you and Cinema Vehicles, you creatively come up with the concepts and you build them to order.
Yeah, that can be certainly one of the cases. It goes everything from the extreme of creating something that's completely unique, that's from the ground up, to something that is just rented out to the studio. If they have a movie that takes place in the 50s, the studio will come and pick all the 50s cars, clean them all up, and then deliver them all to set.
Okay. Now, what other kind of different cars do you have on your lot at Cinema? You have cars that look like total wrecks, but they're still drivable. You have cars that have bullet holes in the windshield. What else you got?
There's a section called the graveyard. It's where all the cars come back and they've been baked. They've been blown up, but they still go out because there's movies that are post-apocalyptic, and they need stuff that's already burned out hulks that you don't want to take them out there and burn them up just for that. They come back with bullet holes. I mean, we did the cars for the movie Faster, and it came back with bullet holes. It came back rolled. Sometimes you don't know how they're going to use them, Right. But the neat thing is that although that's the physical side of building the cars in the Hollywood Garage, on the website, we get a chance to share a lot of aspects of the vehicles, that behind the scenes stuff that they didn't use in the movie. As an example, for Faster, the car, as I mentioned, was never rolled, and it didn't get shot at. He drove off into the sunset. But they did shoot a scene where the two cars crashed into each other, and he crashed, and the car flipped over and everything. And so you get to see a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff.
Very nice. Now, you've got two movies coming out, Captain America and Mission Impossible 4. What's coming up for you in those?
Captain America, those were some classic cars that were just maintained and built for that. There was not necessarily much design involved with that. Right. And then for a Mission Impossible 4, I'm not even necessarily sure I'm allowed to say, but we built a few vehicles that were reinforced to do certain stunts. You're dealing with a very high-profile film, and everything has to be very strategic to spec. Yeah, I can't say too much about it, okay, other than they weren't necessarily designed as far as something like the Batmobile, but they were reinforced to do some very, very elaborate stunts. Okay.
Cars in movies are oftentimes asked to do things that regular cars aren't. Pull, push, people jumping out of onto. Mm-hmm. Is that a particular challenge to you, or is that just a regular part of your job?
Well, that's really not so much my job, because I'm not an engineer. I can point out what looks good, because what the camera's going to see, what it's not going to see. As being a conceptualist, you can say, well, this car's going to do this kind of stunt, and I know that they're going to want to be able to see this, so you can't have a rig sticking out the side of the car. If the car goes on two wheels, you don't want to see the underside. In a lot of the older movies in the 70s and 80s, you'll see a car flip over, and if you step through it, you'll see the pump that will project the car over, and you do it, and you see this right, long thing sticking on it, it's still cheese ball, but they've eliminated that completely, because now they can go ahead and do it, right, and then in post they just take that thing out, so everything looks fancy and looks perfect, so it's cool.
Let's see, in the chat room, The Alien Returns wants to ask, here's one, being a car designer and a car enthusiast, what is your dream street car?
Oh man, the one that's got four wheels. I think that it's kind of an addiction, is that I love all cars, and there's people that are muscle car guys, that are rat rods, that are classics, that are tuners, and I think that more than cars is I love the people that love the cars. I love listening to their stories. I'd love to know what car you have and why it's cool to you. That's why we have the shows that we do on the Hollywood Garage. We like to feature, people's passion for vehicles, and I have a tremendous passion. But when I was a kid, the hardest thing that you can say to a kid is, which Johnny Lightnings or which Hot Wheels do you like? You can take that to the show with you, and you sit there going, and then you just want to bring them all with you, and so that's a hard thing for me. But I appreciate design tremendously. I love the Ferrari 458 Italia. I love the Bugatti Veyron, simply because it's such a massively powerful vehicle. I love design cues of the new Camaro. I think there's some tremendous stuff being put out by Jaguar and Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin and Jaguar both have these supercars that are just absolutely stunning. They're gorgeous design expressions. But I love them for different reasons than I love a Malibu SS, you know, or any kind of 60s muscle car, you know. So there's different aspects to that. In doing stuff in film, you learn to appreciate all cars because you're being asked to do any kind of car that you can think of. So
we're going to give out your website link again in just a moment, but I noticed one of the many things you have on your website are links to a lot of great car chases, car scenes in movies. What's one or two of your favorite car chase scenes in movies? And real quick, what makes a good car chase? What makes a bad one?
Well, one of my favorites for sure is the movie Eagle Eye. And there was an absolutely brutal car chase in there that I had mentioned to you previously. And you felt like you were in it. You know, you were being given the experience. It was almost a little uncomfortable at the way things were hitting each other. The key, I think, to a successful car chase on film is the fact that the director has to be very clear about what he wants to achieve. The editor has to be someone that is really in tune with that. And the sound guys, you know, everybody's got to be on, when you say, you know, you got to be on the same page, you know, that's a given, you know, but that can only go so far. It's the expression, the emotion that you want to capture, you know, a car chase can be something like Bullet, it can be something like Eagle Eye, it can be something like Transformers. Each one is a different animal. Each one tries to achieve a different type of thing. You know, that there's more stress in this one. There's more comedy in this one. There's more, you know, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So Eagle Eye was a great chase. I think that Michael Bay has some great chases in the new Transformers. It's hard to say. There's so many on at least my personal blog that I enjoy. I think that it's really about how they want to convey that emotion, you know, and
so true to whatever the emotion is of the film.
Yeah,
right?
And at the same time,
if it's a horror movie, the chase should scare you. If it's a comedy, it should make you, you know.
But as I said, there's so many ways to screw things up in a movie. It's amazing that a movie gets made and it comes out and you can walk out of the theater going, "Wow, that was really great," you know. But like if you watch the movie The Rock was a pretty good movie and enjoyable. It was a popcorn film. But right in the middle of it, there's this completely random car chase between Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage with a Hummer and a Ferrari, and it's really cool, but you could have taken the whole thing out and had a great movie, or you could watch the car chase all by itself and have a great car chase. But they really, for me, didn't really fit together so well. It didn't make so much sense because the car chase was like 14 minutes long.
Right.
But I think the ultimate car chase, everybody would know, would be the original Gone in 60 Seconds. It's a 40-minute car chase. Who cares about the rest of the movie? Right. It's like, you know, just fast forward right to the car chase and just sit here and watch, you know, just the coolest car chase that was ever shot. It was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, that I found on Popular Mechanics, they were rating car chases, and that was one of the ones that made its top 10, I believe. Real quick, for indie film, do you work predominantly with studios, or if there are indie filmmakers out there watching, do you work with independents? Do you have to have a huge budget to utilize your services? Yeah,
kind of always the big question is that if you have an independent film, it's, we can't have a car built because it's too much. And the reality is that, yeah, the studios may have a $500 million budget, or they may have $5 million for vehicles, but commercials don't have $5 million. You know. We build a lot of stuff for commercials, a lot of stuff for television, a lot of stuff for independent films, and promotional corporate vehicles. That if Pepsi comes in or Red Bull wants a bunch of stuff, we build those too. The thing is, there's a lot of ways to be able to solve that problem, and it doesn't have to bleed you dry. You know, the point is that what is it that you have, and what is it that you want to achieve. And then you have to figure out the best way. Sometimes it requires to paint the car. Sometimes you want to wrap it in vinyl. There's cheaper ways. There's a lot of ways to adjust to create the same kind of thing. So
definitely worth an independent filmmaker checking out your websites and giving you a call.
Totally.
Let's see. In the chat room, we have a question from Banadana Nanadu. I feel like I should know. Is that some sort of song from an old sitcom or something? Do any car creations ever have to be blown up, and do you feel pain at that? Sometimes.
I think certainly, when when you collect all these cars for Dukes of Hazzard, and they proceed to trash them all, you almost watch a generation being cut away, you know. But and that can be hard sometimes. But the reality is that I think it gets outweighed by the fact that the audience gets to go to this movie and enjoys it and has a good time, and that's the ultimate goal at the end of the end of the build. Is this going to solve the problem, the challenge for the film? And although, you know, something that you spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on to make look right, you know it's going to go out and be blown up. Well, you know, hopefully the director makes it look really cool when it goes up, you know, and everybody enjoys it, and you feel good about that it gives people really quality entertainment.
Okay, I want to get to one more chat room question for you as we wrap up here. Sean O would like to ask, what happens to the vehicles after shooting?
Well, depends on what kind of shape they're in, but if you can think of it, that's probably what happens. They'll end up in museums. They'll end up in the producer or the director's or the actor's garage. It'll go to a private collector. It may go to auction.
Or you reuse them, right? There was one I saw in one of your YouTube videos that was in one movie and then got put into the island.
Right. The Minority Report.
Minority Report vehicle went
Lexus,
from Minority Report to the island, right.
Right. So it'll get repainted, it'll get rebuilt sometimes. If it's really cool, obviously it's worth keeping. A lot of times it will go into storage at the shop because it may be a potential of a sequel. So obviously you don't want to throw all those assets away.
Absolutely.
So you want to be able to use them again in some capacity. So the answer would be yes.
All the above.
It can happen in any sorts of ways. You know, I'm just hoping that, you know, some of them end up in my garage.
That's right. You know? Absolutely. Well, it's a great garage you have. So let's go ahead and give out your website again. I think I may have mentioned it now. I'll have you mention it. It's got great information, links to other blogs, your own podcast that you do every week where you talk about the film business and everything else. So that website is
thehollywoodgarage.com.
Great, and then from there you can get to your YouTube page and your blog and everything.
Absolutely, we have a lot of automotive Hollywood content, new shows that go up on the homepage each week, and everything that's how automobiles relate to film and how film uses cars in movies. And it's just a really cool hub where those two worlds collide. And
you host your own segments, and you go on location, and you test out cars, and you give your opinions. A lot of great stuff there.
Yeah.
And on your podcast, you get a little goofy. I happen to listen to a few, and you ask these really bizarre questions. So I'm going to answer one for you.
Okay.
On his podcast, he says, "Hey, I wonder what bald people put for the color of their hair on their driver's license." So the answer to that question, since I can answer for you, is you do put your natural God-given hair color.
Okay.
So on my driver's license, it does in fact say brown.
You can go by the eyebrows.
And you can go by the eyebrows.
Right,
but lots of good ponderings and fun and humor.
Well, we try to ask the
to,
important questions.
You do. You get to them all.
You know, people want to know the answers to those questions.
So the question that we like to get everyone out of here on is, do you have a favorite set speak term? So back to one, for example, and you were a storyboard artist prior to concept design, and you've been on sets. So do you have a favorite set speak term?
Absolutely. The favorite term of mine and of just about everybody I know is that this is the martini shot. That means it's the last shot of the day, the last shot of the film. It means that we've had a successful shoot, that everyone's done what they need to do, and we just need this one last shot, and everyone's excited because this is the one. And when that's complete, there's a tremendous sense of relief and accomplishment. So it's a pretty great experience.
Sounds good. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and having you on.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of Filmnut. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Fireball Tim. Also want to give a special thanks to Stephen and Diane Wallman of Kaimu Nurseries in Hawaii, and that's south of Hilo on the Big Island. Stephen and Diane, it's really nice having all those orchids that you give us that we have here around our studio, so I definitely want to thank you for that. Everyone here at thestream.tv is definitely enjoying them. They are a pleasure. They give more life to the studio. Until next time here on Filmnut, I will see you then.